Hello everybody, as you can see today we're going to talk about Merfolk, and this is a part of the new series I have got here on this channel. The series is going to be dedicated to different old school tribes, and Merfolk is personally I think one of the best tribes of old school. It is really playable, and this has some special nostalgic feelings for me personally because this was the very first deck that I started playing in old school, even before I really got heavily into old school. And it was 3 years ago already. Can you believe that the nostalgic format itself, such as old school 93-94, already has some nostalgic feelings, so I can be feeling nostalgic about the time that I was playing this particular deck 3 years ago. So anyway, of course, if we talk about Merfolk, we don't really have a lot of choice if we only talk about the Swedish banned and restricted list, because in Fallen Empires we have got a plethora of Merfolk. But if we don't use Fallen Empires, then our choice is quite limited, because unlike some other tribes such as zombies, this is an extremely interesting topic by itself. If you think that zombies are a small tribe, you will be very surprised, because so many cards after the Great Creature type revision received the type of zombie. This is not the case with Merfolk. Basically what you see here that says Merfolk, except for the Lord obviously, is going to be a Merfolk, and there is nothing else. They didn't add anything else to that list. So anyway, obviously the most basic Merfolk is Merfolk of the Pearl Trident. This is just like Mons, Goblins, Raiders, and they don't do anything else. I mean, this is 1/1 for 1 blue mana, and I certainly consider that this is not a very good deal. Not because it costs 1 mana, but because it usually wastes a slot in your deck. A slot that can be filled with something really important, such as a clone, if I want to clone my Lord of Atlantis. And speaking of Lord of Atlantis, this is, I think, the best Merfolk that there can ever be. And the reason why he is so good is that he has been errated, and now he is not a Lord, but a Merfolk itself. So obviously nowadays it says that all other Merfolk gain Island Walk and get +1/+1. So if you have only this one, he doesn't pump himself, but he does pump his colleagues that share the same name. So if you have 2 Lords of Atlantis, then they will both be 3/3 Island Walk, which is very powerful. And that's why my very first Merfolk deck decided to capitalize on that. I had clones, I had the Vesuvian Doppelganger, I had also Dance of Many, and very often you can assemble a huge army and attack, especially if your opponent has islands, or if they don't, then you can help them using phantasmal terrain. There is another very interesting, very funny Merfolk, which is Merfolk Assassin. For 2 mana, 1/2, again, because of 1 power, it's not really worth it usually. But he says that he can destroy target creature that has Island Walk if you just tap him. And very often you can use War Barge, you can use the Sandals, I think, also. There is this artifact that gives Island Walk to some particular creatures, and you can just give your opponent's creatures Island Walk and kill them from time to time. And I did use this plan. Also, War Barge can be boomeranged, and it also destroys your opponent's creature. So that is really interesting, but this is more of a combo thing for fun, and it is not really usually competitive or very much playable. Speaking of playable, there is a Fallen Empires. So we finished talking about the older Merfolks, we started talking about Fallen Empires Merfolks. Here we have got River Merfolk 2/1, which is really fair. You know, 1 point of toughness is not really relevant here. And for 1 blue, he has Mountain Walk until end of turn, so a really good one. People usually play him. I also like playing Vidalian Knights. Vidalian Knights is a card I love for different reasons, and one of these reasons is that it has very, very beautiful art by Susan Van Camp. And you can see this Merfolk lady riding this seahorse, you know, sea woman riding a seahorse, and seahorse looks more like a horse than the actual seahorse. This is all very interesting, whimsical, and still really beautiful and somewhat even realistic. And it has this beautiful combination with the frame. 2/2 for 3 mana. It's not tremendously overcosted, especially because it has first strike and also can gain flying until end of turn, maybe jumping out of the water on this seahorse. But unfortunately, this card has what we call island home, so cannot attack unless your opponent has islands, and if you do not have any islands, this card is buried. So I sometimes played it as a sideboard card, and it was okay. Then we are getting to the less important and more weird Merfolk cards. This one, Sea Singer, for 3 mana, just 0/1. Again, has island home, so bury if you control no islands. It's not strictly island home, because island home would typically mean that cannot attack unless your opponent has islands, but there is 0, so okay, anyway, it's not the classical island home. And for tap, you gain control of target creature if its controller controls at least 1 island. So again, you see there is some connection with islands. You lose control of that creature if the single leaves play. If you lose control, or you may choose not to untap. Basically, a little bit like Old Man of the Sea, maybe, or the Preacher kind of ability. So can gain control. I personally haven't used this card, but it might be a good idea. It might be worth it, again, as a sideboard card. It's always good stealing your opponent's creatures, especially if you can find a way to get rid of them and maybe block with them, and this way you can gain control of more than one creature. But then again, this card is very fragile. I personally haven't seen people play it very often. Then there is another Merfolk that has some kind of an ability, some kind of a spellcaster, we can say. For 2 mana, 1/1, which doesn't make him a very good creature for combat. But we have got this ability: 2 mana and tap target creature may not be the target of spells or effects until end of turn. Which sounds beautiful. I mean, who wouldn't like to have that? Who wouldn't like to have a Merfolk that gives your creature Shroud? But the biggest problem is that you can only use this ability during your upkeep, which definitely kills the whole purpose. It definitely kills the whole purpose of having this ability. I mean, why did they do that? What does it actually protect you against? Because if you're doing this during your upkeep, then your opponent can do this in response, and this is absolutely pointless. This is just such a pity. If you could do this at least during your opponent's upkeep, then it would prevent your opponent from, let's say, using sorcery or enchantment on your Merfolk, but then again, it wouldn't be something you would do in response. So it's a brilliant idea, but if we remove that line, this maybe could even see some play, but other than that, it's just useless, absolutely useless as a card, which is a pity. Then we have got, speaking of vanilla Merfolk creatures, we have got vidalian soldiers with different art, and it's nothing special. It's just 2 mana, and we've got 1/2. Again, if you compare it with River Merfolk, usually Merfolk decks are really blue heavy, so most of them are not splashed into any other color. But of course, you may have seen some blue-red and maybe blue and white Merfolks, but usually, I mean, one colorless doesn't really matter here. And personally, obviously, I haven't included these. I would even doubt whether these are a better auto-include than Merfolk of Pearl Trident. I'm not entirely sure about that. Which of these art do you prefer, I wonder? I think I like the Melissa Benson art here. And this one is also, I mean, they're all beautiful. And Richard K. Ferguson also has his really recognizable art style, but I think the best one for me is this one. And then we have got Vidalian Mage. So you see, these Merfolk try really hard to be spellcasters, but unfortunately I think they fail at that. And just like me trying to stabilize my camera. But speaking of the art, I absolutely love. Who can it be? I absolutely love this art. I mean, can you guess who this is? This is obviously Quinton Hoover. And this art is amazing, it's mesmerizing. I cannot express how much I like it. Anyway, let's look at the ability. Now we have 1/1 for 3 mana. I mean, can it get any worse? And the ability is that it counters a target spell if caster of target spell doesn't pay an additional 1 mana. play this ability as an interrupt? Well, essentially, if you think about it, this is a force spike ability. This is a force spike ability, but the importance of force spike is that your opponent doesn't usually see it coming. And I mean, it's not that force spike is really playable in old school, because people usually have a lot of fast mana, and very often they will not be, all tapped, not even having one extra colorless mana. And I'm not entirely sure whether this is really playable or not. I usually think that it's not very much playable. But I mean, if you have a couple of these, your opponent might think a little bit about that. It can be some extra tax on your opponent if they don't have a lot of mana. Maybe it can be working with some kind of mana denial strategy. I'm not sure. But anyway, it doesn't really fit well. It doesn't really fit really organically into the Merfolk tribe if you're just going for the combat heavy creatures that are well designed for combat and are powerful. And there is one bonus creature, because this is not a Merfolk and it has not been corrected. This is a wall that relies on Merfolk, and for 0 and tapping target Merfolk you control, you can allow, as they say, and I like it, I like the wording here, to allow Vidalian War Machine to attack this turn, or to give it +2/+1 until end of turn. And also we have this idea, just like War Barge or Flying Carpet, but Flying Carpet has been errated. This is another issue, that people that are riding this are buried and destroyed if this card is destroyed. So this is basically, if we talk about modern terms of Magic, this is the prototype of the crew mechanic. This was the idea of that. But anyway, I think that they could have at least given it maybe 1 power at least. Would this be too much to ask, especially if it's a wall? I don't know. But if you think about that, well, 0/4 for 3 mana is not perfect by itself. And in order to attack with it, you will have to tap 2 Merfolk, and it will only be 2/5, which is not a lot. I personally tried playing it, didn't really like it. But nevertheless, these are Merfolk. This is one of the original tribes of old school Magic, the original blue tribe. And it certainly is a little bit strange if we consider Fallen Empires. It is not extremely powerful and big if we consider only the first set where these Merfolk were printed. But still, Lord of Atlantis is the deciding factor here. Lord of Atlantis which is really, really unusual for blue creatures, very fairly costed and powerful, and his ability is relevant. So that is it for today. Obviously, I will be back with more stories and reviews of different tribes in old school Magic. And stay tuned for more. If you have any requests, please let me know, because I will be reviewing all of them. But if there is a lot of interest, we can start with some other tribe of your preference. So that is it. Thank you for watching, and bye.